If you think you're underpaid, you've come to the right place, because in this video, I'm going to teach you how to ask for that raise. Hey everybody, it's Brian from The Life After Layoff, and today I want to teach you how to ask for that raise at work. In my career as a recruiter and an HR person, I see a lot of job offers, and I see how it stacks up to the internal equity, because when we run an offer, we actually pull internal equity from a company and we see what external people would stack up to internal people. And honestly, I'd say probably 40 to 50% of the people that I see internally are in the low end of the salary bands established for those roles. So that means if you've been working for a company for a given period of time, it's likely that the open market is going to start passing you by. And especially if you're somebody that has sat in the same role, in the same company for a decade or more, it's almost certain that the open market or the people that we're bringing in off the street are making more than you are. So it can be very easy to feel like you're underpaid if you actually start to dig into it. And let's take into account the time that I record this video, that the labor market is definitely slanted in the favor of the employee, and especially when it comes to wages. We've seen wages going up across the board, inflation is going very high, and companies are getting much more competitive with how they have to attract talent, and that's usually in the form of pay increases. But before we get too far into this video, if you're interested in more videos just like this one directly from a corporate recruiter and an HR professional, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any future posts. All right, so let's jump into how to ask for the pay raise, and there's some things that we have to do first. The first thing we have to do is we have to understand why it is that we're asking for the pay raise. Is it because you're underpaid to begin with? And again, taking into account market conditions and where inflation is going, all those things will factor into whether or not you're being competitively paid for your job type and the company and industry that you're in. The other thing to consider is, has it been more than a year since your last raise? Because if that's the case, you are definitely owed a raise because you're effectively making less money than you did the previous year due to that rising inflation. And if you did get a raise, but it didn't keep pace with inflation, then you're actually taking a pay cut this year to do the same exact work. Or maybe you went back and rescoped your skills, knowledge, and abilities, or maybe you got that education that you've been meaning to get. So if you're a more valuable employee to your employer, then that certainly warrants looking at your compensation and adjusting it accordingly. Of course, this all assumes that the skills, knowledge, and ability that you have gained is actually desirable on the market and for that particular company. So you have to be realistic in how you assess yourself. So let's talk about how to assess your value on the open market, because we have to understand what we're worth and where we currently sit today to ensure that there's not a big gap there. First and most obvious thing is we have to see how our current position stacks up to the external market. So a lot of cases you'll see some job postings that will have salary data in them. Here's a little insider tip to help you figure out what the realistic pay ranges are for your particular position. You want to look at remote jobs that are eligible to sit in Colorado, Connecticut, New York City. There's probably going to be some more that'll be added over time, but those are some of the current locations that have pay transparency acts. So employers that post their jobs in those markets have to publish the wage range as a legal requirement. So if you see a company that is posting a job remotely and it doesn't specify or exclude those states specifically, then legally they're supposed to be publishing that wage range. I know a lot of companies don't do that, but they should be doing it as part of their compliance efforts. So if you're looking for some wage range data, check out some of those postings, but take into account that there are some cost of living differences. So somebody obviously sitting in New York City is going to be looking at a different wage range than somebody that would be sitting in rural Iowa. The second thing that you want to assess is how marketable your skills are. So if you learned a certain technology stack that is no longer valid or the market is moving away from it, then you have to assess that properly. And again, look at those job descriptions that are posted all across the country to get an idea of what industry is asking for in those types of roles. And if you have current skills, or maybe it's a niche skill set that not everybody has, that's going to be worth more to your company and, more importantly, to other companies on the open market. We also want to do our baseline research, hop onto Glassdoor, hop onto Comparably. Indeed has some salary tools. They're not perfect, but they do give you at least some level of a baseline to establish what you should be worth on the open market. And of course, you want to pay attention to some of those local job postings, because companies will publish that information occasionally. So what kind of raises can you expect to get? Now, at very minimum, you should be moving into the minimum of the range. And so if you're seeing jobs out there that seem to be starting in the $50,000 to $60,000 range and you're only paid $40,000, that's a very reasonable expectation to be moved up into where other employers are paying. And looking at your raises, historically, Companies usually target between 1 to 3% for annual raises. Obviously, in today's market, that's not going to cut it, but as we return back to a normal market at some point in the future, I'm sure you'll see that. But it's not unheard of to make 50% increases or more by jumping to another job. So if you're in a low-paying company, it might be worth you testing the waters to get those big jumps. The amount that you should be asking for is going to really vary depending on where you are in the current compensation spectrum and where you should realistically be. So the next thing we're going to do is get our facts straight. How are we going to justify the raise that we're going to be asking for? So again, we've already done the market data research. We should have a decent idea of where we should be comped based on the local market comparators. And now we want to start to build our case. So look over the past year of what accomplishments you have achieved that have directly impacted the bottom line of the business, how you have improved things, and then also look at what new skills, knowledge, and abilities, and potentially education that you have acquired during that period of time that should justify why you should be paid more. You're gonna wanna prepare all that information and set the stage with your boss about what your intentions are. So when you set up that meeting, you wanna give your boss advance notice of your intent for why you wanna meet. You don't wanna catch them off guard. You wanna give them plenty of time to consider what it is that you're gonna be approaching them with so that they can be prepared mentally for it. I would not recommend that you do it during a busy time of the day or a busy time of the week. Save it for a time when you know your boss is gonna be more receptive to your request. I would also suggest that you set aside a calendar invite and let them know in advance that you are preparing to talk about all the new skills, knowledge, and abilities that you bring, and you would like to have a salary discussion with them. That way you're setting the stage and you're not catching them completely off guard. So as you sit down in the meeting, you may actually find that their boss is there or somebody from the human resources department may be in attendance, and that's perfectly normal. But regardless, we want to present our business case to them. So you're going to set the tone of the meeting by establishing your purpose and your intent very clearly, that you have done some research on your job and you feel it's time to have a salary discussion. Then you want to present the data that you have found, including the market wage data that you've discovered, the skills and the accomplishments, and justifying why you should qualify for a significant raise. And you want to do it in a firm and professional way and try not to bring emotion into it. If your boss says they'll take your request and think about it, then you want to set a reasonable follow-up meeting immediately. Say something like, "Thanks for hearing me out. I'm very interested in hearing what you come back with. So can we put something on the calendar this time next week so that we can follow up on this topic?" But you want to get a firm commitment, because if they're non-committal to you and they never follow up on it, it's likely that you're going to be back in the same position you were to start with. But if they say, "No, we think you're worth it, but we can't afford it right now," then I would suggest looking at other alternatives. You can look at other perks or benefits that may take the place of it for the time being, whether it's asking for additional paid time off, maybe a spot bonus, or some other perk that would have some value to you. But that's not going to let them off the hook so easy. We're going to revisit the topic in 3 months and we're going to inform them. Say something to the effect of, "I appreciate that you're hearing me out and I understand the business needs, so let's revisit this topic in 3 months. In the meantime, would you be open to increasing my vacation time or some other perk that you've pre-identified?" If they balk at your number, you can always push back and say, "I've done a lot of research on the external job market and I think that this is very fair based on what other employers are paying. However, I'm happy to go back and do some more research to make sure that my numbers are accurate." That way you're setting the tone that you're not going to back down off of your number. Who knows, it might light a fire under them to take some action before they lose you. Which gets us to the next answer, which is they shut you down completely and say, "No, get out of my office." And then I think you know what you need to do from there. It's time to update our resume and it's time to look for other job opportunities. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, we have to act like free agents and we shouldn't tolerate a company who doesn't value us properly. Now, I know asking for a raise can be particularly nerve-wracking, but if you go about it the right way and you properly value yourself, you should have some success, or at the very least, you'll know where you stand with that company. But if you're in a situation where you feel like you're in a dead end and you're trapped, that is something that I specialize in. I've got a website called alifeafterlayoff.com. It is loaded with tips and tricks, all from an insider's perspective, and it's designed to get you out of dead-end jobs and achieve your true career and income potential. I also share some of my deepest and most intimate knowledge in the form of some training courses. The first one is called Resume Rocketfuel. It is designed to teach you how to write a resume that's going to give you the best chance of getting noticed for those other better paying jobs and ultimately to get that first round interview. Once you get that first round interview, it's up to you to sell yourself throughout the rest of the interviewing process, and that's where the Ultimate Job Seeker Bootcamp comes in. It's going to break down tips and techniques on how to get through each step of those interviews and ultimately how to land that dream job with the dream offer. So if you're struggling, I highly suggest you check those out. I also offer some limited one-on-one private consultation sessions. If you think you need a little more personalized help, you can reach me through my website for that. Appreciate you watching. Good luck asking for that raise, and we will see you on the next one.